Greetings viewers, join me in exploring the abandoned World War II bomber base and post-war motor racing circuit Mount Tarampa, or Lowood. I'll orientate you with these two wartime photos. The upper one shows the airfield at top left as we approach over Mount Tarampa. The lower photo looks down on the airfield, Mount Tarampa ringed in yellow again. So note the different alignments of the two photos in these ways. Here is the wartime airbase Lowood, visible in blue outline in both photos. And in white, here's the parts of the airfield on which cars actually raced in Lowood Raceway for many years after the war. Zooming in on the top photo, you can see a red ring appearing just right of the mountain's peak there. Now, watch it appear in the lower photo, there. And please come with me as I take you there in November 2020. We're on the ground now. After my first several explorations of this site, the job was made much easier for later adventurers by this 1995 sign. Red arrow points to Mount Tarampa again. Same angle before the trees, drag racing in the late 60s. The half-century passage after World War II brought long overdue recognition to what was then a lonely, sad little sleepy hollow, if a delight to explore. Note that the memorials include the short-lived American tenancy here of fighter and anti-aircraft units. One tale I was told here by an inhabitant of that farm over there 30 years ago when I came here for my first ever foot exploration of it. The tale I was told back then was that a bomber during wartime taking off this way, because this was the runway, up and failing to take off and crashed into what was then a lake or a swampy morass over there. You can see it is nothing of the sort now. I see ducks walking, some sort of blackbird walking around pecking at the worms in the grass. Anyway, a 4-engine bomber, he said a Lincoln, went down there, and that crewman, who was a New Zealander, came back after the war and climbed into the mud to get to the wreck and pull things out of it. What can I say? There's nothing to support this story at all. Here are the known aircraft crashes at Lowood in wartime. Not this one. It went missing, which no one would say about a bomber directly across the road, surely. Not this one. It crashed in Brisbane. This one went in a different direction. And this is the only real candidate, but the story fails on other details. Although a colossal Lincoln bomber did crash, it was far away at Amberley Air Base, and after victory over Japan Day. And although Lowood did briefly host the B-24 Liberator heavy bombers of 24 Squadron, these antediluvian giants never had a crash. It's pleasing to say that a surviving Liberator is being restored these days. No, the bombers that crashed at Lowood were Beauforts. During the national emergency of the Pacific War, Australia took a great pride in manufacturing several aircraft types, including 700 Beaufort light bombers that were taking the fight back to the Japanese menace as much as any other aircraft. But they were caught on film having one horrific mid-air crash. This roadside memorial pays tribute both to the wartime heroes of Lowood and the peacetime racing heroes. Men operating from Lowood fought Japanese submarines in the waters off Brisbane, while others went all the way to New Guinea. I hope it's not too tasteless to observe that Flight Sergeant Frank MacDonald, executed in Japanese captivity, deserves better than to have an impossible date on his memorial, i.e. 30th of February. And here's the part that commemorates the heady days of motor racing on the abandoned airstrip. From 1948 to 1966, it was the premier racing track in Queensland in the days before Lakeside International Goat Track. Many great races were held in this slightly mad world of both dream run straight line speeds and claustrophobic hairpins, of a sea of tarmac and a sea of yellow grass, so flat it looked far more like the Ukraine than the Lockyer Valley. It served to amplify motor racing's tendency to break hearts like no other sport. Thank you, Richard F. Carroll, for lending me your final year of Lowood season pass. And yes, I know your middle name doesn't begin with F, but it ought to. Let's talk the Australian Grand Prix, the 25th Australian Grand Prix of 1960. My God, what a rip snorter of a race. It came down to Alec Mildren and Lex Davison. And this is the curve, the final curve coming into the main straight. I want to dwell on this place maybe way too much, because you can walk right up to the fence I'm standing at along the main highway without breaking all the rules I break. You can even trace this swing onto the main straight yourself. Here, in wartime it was just more taxiways, but in racing times it was a heartbreaker of a slow curve. Alright, whatever the hell these things are. You can see quite a lot of them over there running through people's backyards. That's the final leg of the racetrack before you curve back in to the main straight. You can see the War Memorial again over there. Curve back into the main straight, and it was there that Lex Davison versus Alec Mildren won by 1/20th of a second. The Australian Grand Prix of 1960. Yes, so it rejoins the main straight approximately over there. You can see the flower belt start to curve around. Humdinger of a race, and something like 30,000 people came out from the cities to see this. It was a long way out back then, as any serviceman would testify. Lex Davison had blood from stone chips kicked up by Alec Mildren's car on his face when they went to receive their prizes. But as is so often the case, the old fox beat the young hound. Alright, I promised you urban exploration, and now I've gotten mired in the outer reaches of the track. You want that unfeasibly awesome main straight, and now let's go there. So the racetrack main straight was as wide as from there to there. 50 metres. What a dreamy width. Well, aircraft runway, with the takeoff being in this direction. Some of the people whose lot it was to end up living on this former racetrack just incorporated it into their yards. Can still be seen well to advantage in this spot. Sometimes livestock just had to put up with it. Is there not something cooler you sheeple could sit on? But yes, still the churned up bonded gravel out to as far as the sheep go. Look at the hills in the distance. I have a feeling this event will be front page in the Flock of Sheep Times for weeks. Well, now we've come to the former pits area of the racetrack. Scratch pits area. Definitely not what people have fond memories of about this exciting racetrack. I particularly like this one. Look at that double-decker bus converted into a control tower in the background. Would have been over there. Glyn Scott, who later would be killed in a horrific crash on the main straight. Let's stand in the pits and look towards the other side of the track, there. And in these admittedly very bad exposures, here's the start-finish line and pits on the start of the Grand Prix of 1960. Where the dams are in the background, you can see the sandy clay style build up. Those dams are a backstraight of the same racetrack. Access roads for aircraft and jeeps back in wartime, of course. Two kilometres long as well as 50 metres wide, and when you get to this point where you can see the edge of the bitumen runway going down here, it then crosses over and down through someone's property. You can also get an idea of the width of the bitumen area there. And the downhill nature of it, until down at that far fence line, they had almost a complete hair. Sorry folks, that camera ran out of memory and I started again with a phone that often had no sound.
At the Communion Connection Road, it turned around in what was pretty much a hairpin, and a badly cambering one that started coming uphill from having gone downhill slightly for about 2 kilometres at full speed, because with this width you didn't have to worry about slow back markers and so on. So you might have a right royal dice like Davison and Luton did.
So, Lowood Raceway, where you can actually drive on a classic racetrack of the 1950s, so to speak. Yes, the road turns around and comes back uphill, and here's the edge of it as it's coming back uphill, back where the horse is walking towards me, and then starting to curve around here up towards those dams I pointed out from another angle. Yes. Castrol Corner. Significant spot here. Note the right edge of the racetrack in red, and in yellow the spectator area beyond it. This is where a spectacular crash and inferno delayed the 1960 Grand Prix. Ern Tadgell, in a preliminary heat, lost control of his hideously unsound Sabacat at this curve where I'm standing, and here are the skid marks as recorded at the time. There's the spot I was just standing, and you see where Tadgell lost control. Follow the skid marks. Let's look at it from some other angles. There's Mount Tarampa visible in centre left of this picture, and viewed from that paddock on my right here. No crowd. We must presume it afforded poor views at race speeds. Viewed from Castrol Corner now. Note where I was just standing, and here's the full picture. These photos will bring home how the car burned away to nearly nothing. Before leaving this spot, I want to tell you a story which I swear blind is true, but I have no proof of it, and no one's going to believe it. In 1990, I crossed that fence and went through that paddock area to our right. To my amazement, I was buzzed ridiculously low by a pair of F-18s and a pair of F-111s, so low that I flung myself down on the ground face down. If you doubt that anyone could fly a jet so low that you would fear being hit by it, then watch these jet fighters illegally buzzing pedestrians. In my case, they could only have come from Amberley Air Base. My God, an F-111 is huge when you are literally lying in its shadow. By the way, Australia was the only export customer for it. Here are some photos I confess to finding hard to pin down to any stretch of ground today, but I know we're close here, in this area. Now let's move on to Castrol Corner, to the spot where this photographer stood during the Grand Prix. The wartime Air Force facilities had been clustered together here. That's where I'm standing, that asterisk. Clustered together here in this area. As you see here, I'm standing where the black X is, and this cleared area down here, not sure what it is, but I would guess that it's where you keep the aircraft when you're doing servicing and turning around on them like you see here. So that means I'm exploring the wrong side of the road right now, but hey, all those wartime structures were destroyed long ago anyway, so I wasn't actually going to find anything except the bitumen. Here are the wartime structures recorded at the time, and there's where I'm standing. So the old military camp is there. I am going to take us in this direction now.
And as the road curves, as the racetrack curves around through here, you get whatever the hell that is. Taxiway further along too.
So that part's called Irwin Road today. So we come now to Tarampa Bend. You can see it on this map in red, and you couldn't really misplace Mount Tarampa in this photo here. There's that back straight I showed you so much of in the past there, before you erupt onto the main straight where the War Memorial is. Let's see it from the best angle I filmed. Can see a patch where grass grows very sparsely, and that patch curves around. In fact, what grass grows in it, and forget-me-nots, no, lantana, grows in it, tends to have a grid pattern. That's because of the construction of the temporary construction. You can see the curvature through here. You're actually looking at the surface as well, which was bonded gravel. Yes, and note the lines of the grid pattern of the grass. This is the curve entering the main straight. The main straight? Well, if you're thinking that road, no, think again. Think that line my finger is tracing along there, where we go from lush grass to sparse grass, and where you can see patchy, degenerating bitumen or bonded gravel cover. Go from there to the opposite extreme. And when you're done doing your urbex, just drop in on the Tarampa Hotel. I do every time. Here I am again. And nobody, but nobody, can be found who remembers the days in the 1980s when this pub advertised, "I had a drink with the ghost." No one to this day remembers that they used to promote it as a haunted pub and had a haunted seat. Well, I just know I love the place. Thank you for paying attention. Good night, everybody.